All right, let's talk about this shooting that occurred in a church in White Settlement, Texas, just a few days ago. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, let's start with the hero of this incident. There was the head of security, Jack Wilson, who's also a firearms instructor, former sheriff's deputy, I believe. This gentleman, no doubt, saved many lives. Unfortunately, in this shooting, as quickly as it was shut down by a good guy with a gun, there were two people who were shot and killed by this evildoer who went into a church with a shotgun and clearly was trying to kill as many people as possible. The shooter has been identified. I guess we won't name the shooter because people prefer that we not name shooters these days, and I understand that. Although the name is on the biggest news websites in the world, so I don't know if that really does anything. Nonetheless, he had been known to go to this church in the past and demand money. They would give him food, but he would demand money. He was wearing a fake beard, a wig, a hat, and a long coat when he went into the West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement. He killed Richard White and Anton Tony Wallace. So he killed two people. And this whole thing just happened on Sunday during Sunday service. And this is a moment where you stop and you say, well, thank heavens. I mean, it's tragic that there were two people killed during church. And there's also the trauma of all these individuals who were gathered to celebrate the Eucharist and Jesus and Christianity. And two people died there. And they saw it happen in front of them, their parishioners. And that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. So then the damage here is considerable. But the damage also would have been much worse. You would have had a mass casualty event if somebody had not stopped this fellow. And then you get into the political narrative right away. Because here's the big problem for libs and the occasional so-called conservative that the libs love to pretend is the one who's really speaking the truth about conservatism by bashing it all the time, including Second Amendment-related issues. Some of you even know who I'm talking about without me naming them. This is the Jennifer Rubin routine or the Max Boot routine. The real conservatives hate conservatism. That's quite a thing that they pull off. And the media giving them all this attention and platforming them so that they can spread that message of the real conservatives hate conservatism. We're supposed to not notice that that's happening. We're not supposed to care, apparently, that that's what's going on here. But here's the problem for the gun control advocates and for the liberals who are so very, very smug on firearms. Here's what we know. This shooter we have every reason to believe this shooter would have continued his rampage against defenseless people, men, women, and children in a church, and could have killed who knows how many, a dozen, 24 before law enforcement was able to get to the scene. And because he was just picking people at random to shoot. He had a shotgun. He had more rounds. And even if the congregation had tried to overpower him, he would have been able to get off at least a few more shots, kill a few more people. And that's assuming that the fight or flight response didn't result in most of the parishioners who were there to celebrate Jesus and Christianity. Or they're not prepared for. Actually, in Texas they were prepared for this, but generally speaking, the folks in a religious service are not thinking about this kind of thing. More people would have died. But Texas allows individuals, not just security, individuals to carry firearms in church. You're allowed to carry a gun in church. And I got to tell you, somebody who, I remember I was at midnight mass, just over obviously right before Christmas, and a very, very crowded church here in New York City. Now, granted, we have a lot of law enforcement presence, a lot of NYPD here in New York, and their response time is fast, but it wasn't St. Patrick's Cathedral, where they do have a lot of armed security, the biggest, most well-known Catholic church in New York City. But there were enough people gathered in there that all it would take is one person with ill intent get in there with a standard handgun, and you could kill a dozen people before anybody would be able to do anything, cause mass panic and hysteria. And you can't have no one's concealed carry in New York City unless they're law enforcement or they have very specific circumstances. In Texas, you can conceal carry. And that is what the argument turns into for people who say, oh, we shouldn't have armed personnel in classrooms. We shouldn't have armed personnel in church. Well, if a church is a gun-free zone, this is what liberals never seem to understand. The libs don't get this. If a church is a gun-free zone and somebody wants to kill a lot of people in a church, in this case because of guys clearly disturbed, but also had some beef with the church. They weren't, because the church wasn't his personal ATM machine. If an individual wants to do harm to a church like this, and they go in there knowing that unless there just happens to be somebody from the law enforcement community who is carrying in church, that they will have free reign, and that they're going against an unarmed civilian populace in an enclosed environment where they're not expecting it. The best place for an evil mass shooter to try and kill a lot of people is a gun-free zone. We know this. All the data supports this. It couldn't be more obvious at this point. But liberals, because they hate guns, and also guns are now a cultural signifier. There's a separation between those who support the Second Amendment and those who don't. If I know, for example, that you support the Second Amendment, it is overwhelmingly the case that you're also going to be more traditional in your views, pro law enforcement, pro military, limited government. You're going to have at least some, if not the full range of conservative tendencies. All right, that doesn't mean that this is an absolute, but generally speaking, if you're somebody that supports the Second Amendment, supports concealed carry, or open carry, whichever it may be, liberals also don't seem to understand that you don't have to have everybody carrying in a church. You don't have to have anybody carrying in a church. But if there is, in a place like Texas, the law in place that allows for concealed carry, the bad guy can't know if this is going to, if he's going to end up getting hit with a headshot from 40 feet away, which is exactly what Wilson pulled off here. Which, let's also note, I fired, I can't, how many tens of thousands of rounds out of handguns over my life, and your lives are at risk. There are civilians. Wilson said the only way that he could get the bad guy without endangering civilians was with a headshot. One shot, one kill. Headshot at 40 feet. Took him out. That's not easy to do. I mean, that requires a steady hand training and real courage. So now the libs will say, oh, well, the argument turns out he's part of the security of the church. So he's not just a person who happens to carry, but they don't understand that even anybody in there being able to carry changes the calculation for a mass shooting like this. Means that a church all of a sudden becomes a less appealing place for a psychotic, evil mass shooter. I don't know if the guy was a psycho or not. I'm guessing he was. He's obviously evil. To go in and kill a bunch of people. And that, changing the calculation of the bad guy is something you want to do before anything happens. Now you get to the debate, because this is the problem. This was a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun in a church in Texas, which allows people to carry guns to church. This is, for liberals, in terms of narrative, this is their worst nightmare. Because this is proof. They always tell us we need gun control. I mean, I had to deal with this on Fox recently. It was really a kind of, the Democrat I was dealing with, it was a dumb conversation, because she's just saying, well, we need more gun control. I said, well, the gun control laws we have already, this person was in violation of them and didn't stop them. So now you want to add more laws that wouldn't have stopped what happened, and what happened was already in violation of law. And the libs go, yes, because we don't want violence. Okay, yeah. Nobody wants violence against innocents. This is a stupid position they take, but this is what they do. But this case, what they do is when there's an incident of violence and people are scared and people are upset, they say, we need more gun control because we care about saving lives. And those who believe in the Second Amendment, believe in the right to bear arms, say, well, hold on a second. What you are proposing would not have stopped the thing that we are talking about right now. So why are you using this as a data point for proposing something that's completely, that would be completely irrelevant to the circumstances of the shooting incident we're talking about? Oh, it's because they have an impulse. They have a desire for gun control, irrespective of how effective that gun control effort will be. Gun control has been turned into, for libs, it's just a good thing. More gun control, always better. It's like government. More government, always better. Taxes. More taxes, always better. They've been conditioned to think this way. They've been brainwashed to think this way. So while they propose laws that wouldn't stop the very shooting that they are using as the inciting incident for the conversation the national conversation we're having, in this case, this is proof. Texas gun laws work. Texas gun laws work. And they say, well, this guy, and so now they've got to figure this out somehow. And so what they do is they claim that, well, the security, fine. If you want to have arms, if you want to pay for armed security in a church, maybe that's okay. But we don't want random citizens concealed carrying. First of all, there's data that shows, and law enforcement doesn't like to hear this, there's data that shows that concealed carry permit holders in this country are more law-abiding than law enforcement. Yeah, that's a real thing. And concealed carry holders also, in a lot of places, have to go through some safety course. But if this is the problem. The libs that don't believe in guns, don't like guns, don't understand that anybody who's getting a concealed carry permit, who wants to go through that process and wants to carry a firearm with them, those are people who overwhelmingly are gun people, like to shoot, know how to shoot, go to the range. They are Second Amendment people, right? It's not, they don't just go buy a piece and carry it around. I'm not saying no one does this, but very, very, I mean, everyone that I know, and I know lots of concealed carry permit holders, they're good shots. They understand basic tactics, and they're good shots, and they are very safety conscious and very law abiding. So then they say, oh well, this shooter though, the shooter that got taken out by Wilson, and everyone's saying Wilson's a hero, and he is. I mean, that guy, man. I mean, this could have gone worse in so many ways, and to pull off one shot headshot 40 feet away in a church, crowded, people screaming, 2 people just got killed right in front of him. All of his training came together. I mean, we just salute and thank this hero who managed to prevent so much worse. Jack Wilson, 71 years old, by the way, as well. Another thing about concealed carry, you don't have to rely on the 25 to 45-year-old guys to storm the front of the church with their bare hands. 71-year-old with training is going to get it done, as this guy did. So what the libs say, though, is, well, there are all these other people, though, who are in the church who were, because you can see this. This was all on video, by the way, which is the other part of it that is so powerful, because liberals usually like to construct the narrative in a very specific way so that it favors their political agenda. Even when there's just facts to line up, they will do it so that it's more amenable to whatever they want your takeaway to be. So in this case, what you had was an actual video, because they were live streaming the service. You can see it for yourself. I don't want to play it on air. It's disturbing because you hear the gunshots and you hear people screaming in terror. But you can see exactly what transpired here. And you can see that this worked. This was textbook why Texas allows concealed carry in church. Textbook. And the good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. This is that. That's what happened here. And so the libs are freaking out because, they have all this narrative about how, oh, that never happens, and everyone with a gun is going to be some kind of a yahoo who's going to just be shooting and everything. And there are 6 other, I believe, I think the number was 6, concealed carry permit holders who also drew their weapons and moved to the front of the room. And there was some editorial, I think it was in USA Today, by somebody who does not know anything about guns, firearms, Second Amendment. She wrote, Jack Wilson is exactly the type of person you want around with a gun because he's a firearms instructor, but we know nothing about at least 6 other parishioners who also appear to draw their handguns, and that's terrifying. This was USA Today, one of the biggest papers in the country. This is the editorial they published. That's terrifying? I think what's a lot more terrifying is the prospect of being a parishioner sitting in those pews in White Settlement, Texas, and watching as person after person get shot, totally defenseless, because libs don't want us to have guns. I mean, I'm in a gun-free zone basically here in New York City, and it's appalling. Libs don't want us to have guns. That just goes to show you, though, how deep the Second Amendment derangement goes, is that you'll have people who think that their opinions on this are well-informed and that their opinion should matter more than just yours because, they're experts or something. Oh, this person's an expert in nothing, from what I understand. And they're terrified that there are other parishioners who had firearms. Guess what? There could have been multiple shooters in that church. Or what happens if Jack Wilson misses and that shooter, who, by the way, had a shotgun, which up close, I'd probably take the shotgun over whatever Wilson was carrying as a sidearm. If you're just talking about going firepower to firepower here. What if Wilson had missed with that first shot and the shooter had got him? Okay, you had armed security. You had one, which is a lot more than basically most churches in the country are going to have. And what if, by the way, what if everyone knows who that security officer is? Who do you think the first person is that the shotgun-wielding maniac is going to go after when he wants to do a mass shooting in a church? I'll just go up to the one armed officer, or the one armed, rent-a-cop, or the one armed parishioner that everyone knows is the security guy. And guess what? He's done. You've already started your mass shooting, and now you got free reign because you're in a gun-free zoning. No, instead, 6 parishioners were there, and that's just a reminder that, this church was ready. These parishioners were ready. They took their safety in their own hands. By the way, none of them panic-fired. None of them, lit off a couple rounds just because they were terrified. No. They drew their weapons. They moved to the front of the church. They helped secure the area. There could have been a second shooter. So not only do you have the possibility that if Wilson gets into a gun battle, you don't want just one guy against one guy, and then what happens if the bad guy wins that? Fortunately, Wilson certainly was more than up to this challenge. But having the additional parishioners there with guns, everyone should feel safer as a result of that. I would feel safer. I feel safer knowing that the people that I go to church with every Sunday, I would feel safer knowing that some of them were concealed carrying next to me. Why wouldn't I? I mean, and the people who a lot of the people who tend to conceal carry, the people who are former military themselves, people who really, care about public safety, care about their own safety, take it into their own hands. These are the people you want to have guns. Liberals hated this situation because you got to see in real time that our argument makes sense and their argument is silly and dangerous and will result in more people getting killed. Our argument, legal concealed carry permit holders should be able to bring guns into church, and that states should not just ban concealed carry for all law-abiding citizens because they don't like guns, because guns are bad. That is silly. It is foolish. It is wrong, and it is dangerous. Our argument is better than theirs. That's what this showed us, and that's why they're scrambling to find some way to explain this incident so that it can fall within the narrative that they're going to tell people. But one of the problems you deal with whenever you got libs, they never accept that they're wrong. Doesn't matter what the evidence is, doesn't matter what the reality of the situation turns out to be. So they won't change their tune on this, but just remember this. When we come on this show, when I talk to you about these issues of Second Amendment and self-defense, the right to bear arms, we're right and they're wrong. And that's not going to change. Team Buck, great to have you back in 2020. I'm so excited for the year ahead that we are going to have, and I appreciate all of you who were able to listen to our birthday special, which we released on December 27th. It's just some stories that I think you might find kind of amusing. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that one yet, that's an evergreen. So that's media speak for you. You can listen to that one anytime you want. That will stay as good content for you, and it's my just chance to speak to all of you as Buck. To all of you. I don't know why I just went third person there, but I have a cold, so you got to give me a little bit of leeway today. Producer Mark and I are both, man. We're sniffling it here. We're trying to decide which one of us is sicker. I'm pretty sure it's me, but Mark is, I'm sure, not the least bit grouchy when he has a cold. No, I'm sure Mrs. Mark has no problem keeping you.
Oh no, I'm not a pain in the butt when I'm sick at all.
No, never. By the way, I hope you told some people for my birthday and for New Year's about downloading the Buck Sexton Show on the iHeart app or on Apple Podcasts, because that is what I asked for Christmas and New Year's and my birthday. Team, this is a horrible thing to have to say over the holidays, but anti-Semitism is clearly on the rise, particularly in the New York area where I'm coming to now with this show, and it's difficult to keep track now. There have been so many anti-Semitic attacks against our Jewish brothers and sisters here in New York City, that it's tough to keep them separate in your head when they say, oh, this attack, that attack, this prosecutor says, that prosecutor says about the attack. There's so many of them that you have to really focus in on the details. The most horrific one was at a Hanukkah party at a rabbi's home in New York City, which was called by some a domestic terrorist act. And you had 5 people who were stabbed. Governor Cuomo has called this an act of domestic terrorism. The victims were taken to 2 hospitals. I believe one was in serious condition. This guy went in with a large knife, and he attacked people at a Hanukkah party. He did seek them out. It's certainly an act of hate. It's being treated as a hate crime. There have been some other attacks as well here in New York City. So that was the most prominent one. There have been some others, though, where people are being just attacked on the street, who are visibly Orthodox Jewish, Hasidim, I believe, in some cases. There's surveillance video also showing some of these different attacks. And so the Jewish community in New York right now is understandably very concerned. There's a sense here that for whatever reason right now there is a surge in these attacks. Perhaps people who already have anti-Semitism in their heart and are a bit deranged see this as a moment to, because, there's a momentum to fear. There's a momentum to terror. When you can string together a series of attacks against a group, it adds to the sense of anxiety, the sense of a lack of safety on the streets of New York. There's this individual who's charged in the attack again at the Hanukkah party. There's also a woman who was involved in an attack on Jewish individuals on the street, who was not her first time that she had done this kind of thing. And I'm going to get into the change in bail here in New York City, which has resulted, I think, in some of what has been going on here. Some of why these dangerous individuals were in a position to continue this spree of attack. But this is what's so interesting from the political perspective on this. And by the way, I'm very heartened. We're just talking about firearms. There were some members of the Jewish community here in the New York area, New York suburbs, not near New York City, who were open carrying rifles outside of their service. And I'm sad that it has come to this, but I'm also completely supportive of anyone, members of the Jewish community certainly included in this, who wants to take their safety into their own hands. It would be, as far as I'm concerned, it's not just that we should have concealed carry as an option in church. Of course, we should have concealed carry as an option in synagogues too, at temple. People should be able to. They should be able to make that choice. You have a new surveillance. By the way, this is what I was trying to find before. There's a surveillance video from December 23rd, a 22-year-old Hasidic Jewish man defending himself with a 24-year-old woman punching him in the neck. And the attacker allegedly yelled anti-Semitic slurs while doing it, and being investigated as a hate crime. 2 women were arrested in connection with the incident, and one of them has been charged with the assault. There's also another anti-Semitic attack in Brooklyn. There's a group of people who struck a 23-year-old Hasidic man over the head with a chair and punched him in the face. Police believe the group was connected to an attack on a 56-year-old Hasidic man in the same neighborhood, which security cameras captured earlier that day. I mean, there's a lot of these attacks that are happening in the New York City area. Why aren't we having a national conversation on anti-Semitism right now? I mean, these are news reports, and as we know, violent criminal acts do tend to get news coverage, but why is the narrative so different here? I saw fake honest newsman Jake Tapper, fake Tapper, ask somebody, would these attacks be different if would they be treated differently by the media? He asked, I think, a Democrat in Congress this, or some Democrat, if the attackers were white nationalists. Of course, this is like the most obvious thing in the world. If these were white nationalists attacking members of the Jewish community, and remember, we've been told there's this huge surge because of Trump and in white nationalist violence and white nationalist attack. We've been told this all along, and yet what's the problem for just like the problem for the liberal narrative in Texas is that a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy with a gun. We saw it on video, couldn't be more obvious. What we say will work, we have perfect proof of it. What they say will work makes no sense when it comes to gun control. They claim that white nationalism is on the rise, is the primary terrorist threat in this country, and we should all be deeply, deeply concerned about it. That's what they say to us. Meanwhile, I believe without exception, I could be wrong, but without exception, every single one of these anti-Semitic attacks, including a guy busting into a home with a machete and hacking at people during a Hanukkah service because they're Jewish. Also, prosecutors say that he searched on Google, why did Hitler hate the Jews before the attack, though I think we know this guy's about as anti-Semitic as you're going to find. Problem for the liberal media right now is that all the attackers are African-American. Oh, well, what do they make of I mean, we're supposed to be afraid of the big surge of white nationalists because of Trump. That's what they always tell us. No, but the attackers, one of them, a female attacker, is black. The attacker at the Hanukkah ceremony, black. All the attackers in these incidents are black. Every single one of them. And you got a whole number, a whole slew of these attacks, without exception. They're all black. And so now you look at this and you say, well, hold on a second. We've been told that there's we all agree that that you need to stamp out anti-Semitism. I mean, all decent people understand that we need to protect our Jewish brothers and sisters as you would protect anybody in this country from violence and from harm of this kind. But we also are always being told that there's this surge in white nationalism because of Trump, and that's where the real anti-Semitism is. And yet, in this instance, there is a strange, muted nature, a sense that this is not as important a story because all the attackers are black. I don't know if they vote or what their politics are. I'm going to guess that none of these attackers have ever been photographed wearing a MAGA hat and are Trump supporters. I'm just going to put that out. I'm going to guess. I mean, just by the numbers, it's likely that they are not Trump supporters based on the reality of demographic and voting patterns here in New York City. I think that's a fair guess. So what are we supposed to take from this? Why do you have so many of these horrific incidents and you have African-American attackers of Jewish people in New York City? I mean, trying to hack them to death with machetes because they hate Jews. We're always told that hatred of another race, another ethnicity, is really only something that white people have. This is the liberal narrative on this, that the isms, racism, anti-Semitism, this is a white against other people thing. It's not possible for other marginalized groups, they will say, right? Because that's the terminology, marginalized groups. It's not possible for them to be just because they're not in power the same way. This is the rot, the intellectual, psychological, emotional rot of intersectionality on display. The left inherently believes that black violence, anti-Semitic violence like this against the Jewish community is less of a concern because they believe the black community is oppressed, and therefore, because white people are the oppressors in society, that's always going to be a much bigger story to them, because they bring this narrative focus to these events. This is the backdrop. This is the context that they will always put it in. And there are even some news reports. I mean, you see some of these stories, and they will tell you that, there's rising tensions between the Hasidic and, black community in Brooklyn. I saw one of these, I think it was a CBS piece or an NBC piece, I forget which one, and how, there are, Jewish landlords and tension with the black community. And there's always this additional context they give when there are attacks by members of the black community in New York City against members of the Jewish community. And this goes, I mean, you can see this with, Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton's always gotten a pass for inciting a riot that killed a Jewish man. I mean, and saying horrific anti-Semitic things. He's got his own TV show, folks. Okay, on MSNBC. No one ever made him. I mean, Al Sharpton, it tells you really everything you know about the Democratic Party today. But there's this enormous double standard in play. And we see it because of intersectionality, because they always view any act committed by any white person, particularly if it's a white Republican, that is anti-Semitic in nature, is useful to the left-wing narrative because they will tie it to Trump, even if the person has never voted and doesn't even care about Trump, right? It's a white person who attacks a Jewish, a white non-Jew, obviously, who attacked a Jewish person is a result of Trump's anti-Semitism. That is the narrative. That is what they're that the propaganda the news media is pushing at you. A black person, or in this case, several black people, different black people in different incidents, who attack members of the Jewish community, try to kill them, try to hack them to death in their own homes over a high Jewish holiday. That's just, the act of a bad, deranged person, and, we got to do more to make sure that doesn't happen again. Maybe if we just get rid of guns, that'll be, all that's needed or something. I mean, that's what they come up with. So when I talk to you about narrative and the propaganda from the left, I mean, this is a perfect example of it. We're not having some national conversation about hatred from within minority, racial minority communities of the religious minority Jewish community. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about whether there's perhaps a little bit too much of a like Louis Farrakhan, for example, prominent black preacher, able to say horrifically anti-Semitic things about Jews. And, remember that? He took that photo with Barack Obama. I mean, there's these, which the photographer hid. There are these huge double standards that play all the time. Cannot trust the media. They're not honest. They lie to you. This is yet another example of that. Oh, speaking of media propaganda, this was a great one. This was really one of my favorite little moments on Twitter in a while, where you see that they're willing to there's a willingness to lie on the left. There's a willingness to be completely disingenuous and dishonest about things that you really can't ignore. And again, sorry for my voice today, guys. If I sound like I'm, if I sound like I'm sick, it's because I am. But here's what we got. There's this story that counties, Ezra Klein, who's supposed to be an intellectual on the left, he's a little propagandist. There's no intellectual honesty with the guy whatsoever. Everything I've ever seen him put out there is just classic. But he kind of looks like a little smart nerd, and so the left is like, oh, he must be really smart. Like, no, false. But they've elevated this guy just because I can't even really understand. Well, I do understand, because he looks like what a Brooklyn hipster thinks an intellectual is supposed to look like, because he's a Brooklyn hipster. But he put this out. We found that counties that had hosted a 2016 Trump campaign rally saw a 226% increase in reported hate crimes over comparable counties that did not host such a rally. Wow, that's a really powerful statistic, isn't it? Counties, this is what they're telling you, after they hosted a Trump rally, a 226% increase in hate crimes in that county. Wow. There must be a lot of hate that happens as a result of Trump rallies. Oh, hold on a second. Ezra Klein of the Washington Post here, or Ezra Klein citing the Washington Post. Where did they get this methodology? He just put this tweet out, by the way, on New Year's Eve day. Well, where did they get this methodology of the 226% increase in reported hate crime? Oh, you know what they did, folks? They just looked at hate crimes in places, reported hate crimes in places where Trump had a rally versus all other counties. Guess what? They made no effort whatsoever to control for population differential. So when Trump has a rally in a county that has a population of 2 or 3 million people, they then said, and they compared it to all other counties, and they said, oh, there's this huge spike in hate crimes compared to a county that might have 50,000 people. I mean, it's not even malpractice of statistics. It's just dishonest. I mean, it's just propaganda. This is lie. And they keep pushing this. And they've known this is not true for months. This came out initially, I think, over the summer. Even better, when they did the same thing for rallies in 2016 in Hillary Clinton counties, guess what? The reported hate crimes were even higher in terms of their increase than the Trump rallies in those counties. Because this is a crap methodology. It's dishonest on purpose, but it allows you to come up with this headline. I mean, this is the way that people who don't care about being fair and honest and ethical in their work can, get a lot of clicks and do whatever they want to do. I mean, this would be like saying, well, after, Beto O'Rourke campaigned in a bunch of major American cities, and those cities saw a huge spike relative to other cities in violence, just call it violence overall, after Beto was there. And all they were doing was looking at big cities and how many people are killed in big cities versus little tiny cities and how many people are killed in tiny cities. Say, see, big spike after Beto spoke there. I mean, a third grader can figure this out. No offense to the third graders listening to this show. You guys are very smart, and you would have figured it out way better than the Washington Post. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, a little kid would know that this is a garbage way to gauge it. Ezra Klein, so-called left-wing intellectual. I mean, this guy, so dishonest. Oh, he's the whole thing. But, he looks the part. Kind kind of talk fast, talks like somebody who's an intellectual, kind of does one of these things where he's, yeah, so I've got smart guy glasses and I talk really fast and I look like a nerd. So no, that doesn't make you smart. And it certainly doesn't make you ethical or wise. The fact that he's still putting this out just goes to show you, here's a guy that's, oh, by the way, had tremendous access to the Obama administration, used to have dinners with Obama. The left loved this guy for all 8 years of Obama. And he runs Vox. He's the founder of Vox.com, which is the most annoying beta male left-wing site in existence. And yet, here he is, just spreading a lie that, I mean, I would challenge, I would love to sit down and debate this issue with him. You get absolutely crushed. But these guys never debate anyone anymore because they're just peddling in dishonesty.